Hi there. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. Uh, I'm sort of going to introduce you to a really interesting person today. This is my guest today is Ian Rostowski, and Ian is one of the top lawyers of Israel, and he's going to talk to us about the Israeli ecosystem of startups. But those of you who are following the news may be aware of the fact that there is a sort of a war going on right now in Israel as we speak. Ian, I hope you are safe. Welcome to the show. And
Thank
I
you.
sort of say that we hope that you and your family are all safe. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from Tel Aviv. I should be in my office, which is also in Tel Aviv, but I'm at home at the moment. And unfortunately, last night, we had some bomb scares in Tel Aviv in the area. So we all had to go into the bomb shelters. So if unfortunately there will be an event during our talk today, I may have to take a break. I very much,
of course, without.
but unfortunately, it's a possibility.
And how far is that bomb shelter?
It's in my house. Where every house, modern house built in the last 20 plus years has to have it's a room, but it's reinforced concrete with special windows and special doors. So if a bomb lands outside or on the roof, it won't. You'll stay safe. So the trick is to get into the bomb shelter in time. You have around about 1.5 minutes from the siren. There's a siren, and you have to be in the bomb shelter within 1.5 minutes. That's the drill.
Okay, I just do hope that you and your family is safe. And yes, at any point in time, if you need to, but of course, that's a priority. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Ian, I just want to understand your sort of involvement with the startup scene. Usually, when you think about startups, you don't really quite think about lawyers. So, how is it that you got so involved in the startup scene? Talk to me about that.
Israel is maybe special in this in this matter. Maybe in America they also have lawyers like that, but lawyers who really deal in the high-tech ecosystem are very much part of the ecosystem. Like at our firm, we represent literally hundreds of technology companies and investors. So you're very much at a crossroads that you see a lot of deal flow, a lot of things happening. So you're very much involved in the ecosystem, and we also try to take a very proactive approach and help our clients get finance and get investments and help our venture funds find companies to invest in. So we're very much involved, and I've been doing this for 30 plus years, so I know the ecosystem very well, and that's what I do for a living. So I'm not on the technology side, and I've learned that things that I thought were great were not so great, and things that I thought were less great were great success. So we understand that we don't really understand. A lot of investors think they understand, but there's a lot of luck involved. But we know as lawyers that you can't really evaluate if something's going to succeed or not. But to have a lot of experience in working with founders, and at the end of the day, the management and the founding team, that is what determines success or not. It's great.
That's fabulous. So, you are absolutely spot on that the management team, the leadership team, and of course the rest of the team there actually determines the kind of success that you have. But I want to, do that in the second half. I just want to first get an idea of, just what makes Israel. I mean, it's the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, and when you really look at Israel's startup system, Israel, from the size of the country, Israel is about half the size of the state of Kerala in India. Is that a
Yeah,
reasonable, comparison?
right. It's about 9 million people. It's a small country. It's in U.S. standards, it's the size of New Jersey, which is a small state. And one of the reasons for success is that it is a small country, which means from practically speaking, the ecosystem is very close. It's all within a 2-hour drive. Okay, you can get from the most southern point, which says Beersheba, of the big high-tech hubs, to going north, south, east, or west. It's a 2-hour drive maximum, maybe 2.25-hour drive. If you have a helicopter, you can do it in 15 minutes. But so it's very easy to get around. A lot of people know each other. A lot of because of the school system, university system, the army system, a lot of people, coming through that funnel know each other. Okay, so that also helps to create founder teams which are, successful. More, they understand each other. There are less arguments and splits. There are issues between founders, but less, I think, than in a lot of other countries, because they have a similar culture, similar background, similar goals. So there's also very tight cooperation between the academic institutions, which give a lot of in-licensing to technology companies, between the military, where a lot of people are trained in technology, and high-tech companies, mainly in the cyber field. So, the whole ecosystem, because of the size of the country and the culture and the way the academic and school system and military system are built, it all helps to create the ecosystem.
Perfect. So thanks. For the benefit of our listeners, those who have just joined us, I'm talking to Ian Rostowski. He's talking to us, from Israel. He's been a long-time observer, 3 decades of working with the startup ecosystem in Israel. And one of the questions that I was exploring with him is, what makes the Israeli startup system so powerful, because it's the third largest ecosystem of startups in the world. And Ian talks about a couple of different factors. A, the size of the country is small, so you can go from one end to the other, north to south, east to west. You can do it in under 3 hours, if you will. And the other thing that is happening is that there is a very strong sort of a pipeline from the academic institutions, so the school, college, and you also have the military service that people have to mandatorily go in. At which stage do they get in for military service in Israel?
At the age of 18. At the age of 18, boys are supposed to do 3 years and girls 2 years. Quite a lot of people get exemptions for some reason or the other, but there's a lot of people who do their military service, and a lot of them go into units that are that they actually get trained in technology, whether it's with weapons, the Air Force, Navy, their cyber units, their intelligence units, that they trained in computers and technology, which gives them an advantage, because it's not as if you go to university and have academic education and learn mathematics, and it's actually very practical stuff. So the Israeli entrepreneur has a very practical approach to solving problems, because that's how they are taught to deal. You just have to solve problems, find solutions in the quickest way, the most cost-effective way, and to learn on your feet, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I've been fascinated with the ecosystem, which is so strong in the area of cybersecurity. If you look at intelligence, cybersecurity, these are some of the firms in Israel are really well known for the work that they do in this space. What gives them the kind of an advantage? Why is it that Israel is so strong, specifically in cybersecurity?
Yeah, the cybersecurity is definitely tied to the military, because, as I said, there is a lot of elite units that deal with cyber issues, things that are not public knowledge, and people don't exactly know what they do and but they come out of the army. As I said, you have to sign in for 3 years, which is the basic training. But people who advance in these cyber units, a lot of them sign on for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Okay, so you come out of the army, say at the age of 24, 25, you've had like 6, 7 years of dealing with cyber, in the highest levels, and so you then maybe go to university, or maybe during your army service they will pay for your university education. So you come out of there fairly highly skilled with a skill set that the average student from in other areas of the world would not have anything near the same kind of the same kind of background, education, experience, in fact.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that you're saying the 6 or 7 years of working in the cutting edge technology in the cyber field gives Israel that advantage. What other, when you look at the unicorns in Israel, what are some of the broad clusters where you see a larger number of unicorns, if you will? What would that be?
Israel at the moment has about 65 unicorns, which is the third biggest in the world. It's more than Europe, and a lot of those are cyber. The reason is that because of people somehow come through that funnel of the army and whatever with ideas of how they can deal with real issues, real cyber issues, and they form startup founding teams that have succeeded statistically in building significant companies. They have really groundbreaking technology. They get a bit of government funding and a lot of funding from funds. Funds like to bet on these kind of teams because they have good ideas and statistically a fairly good chance to succeed. Not all of them succeed, but statistically a lot of them have succeeded and succeeded in a big way. So and they even entrepreneurs on their third, fourth, fifth startup, having sold or IPO'd others, Also in Israel, if you fail in a startup, that doesn't mean that you necessarily are out of the game. You can fail and then form with another team, another startup, and it doesn't. You learn from your mistakes. It doesn't mean that you burnt and no one will touch you anymore. Okay.
How does that tolerance for failure, risk, comfort with risk, where does that come from? What is the origin of that? I mean, what does Israel do as a society when kids are growing up in school, college, and the family system? Where does that risk-taking element come from?
Well, because it's a country born out of war and conflict, and and the people a lot of people immigrated to Israel, or the founding fathers were, a lot of them were Holocaust survivors coming from the Holocaust, from Europe, from other areas. So they say, we've a lot of them also in the army, they see, very serious things going on. So they say, we prepared to take risks. The worst we can do is fail, and failing as a starter is not the worst thing that can happen. And statistically, quite a lot fail, but quite a lot of succeed. And people remember the successes; they don't remember the failures. Okay, we've seen investors who have lost money with founders, and some of them set up with a different team. If it's the same team, that's not going to work, but they set up a different team, maybe founder here, founder there, and people are, if they've got a good idea and they didn't, they failed not because they were dishonest or or crook people. They failed because a lot of reasons startup fail. The startup will fail. So often they get a second chance, maybe because of the other founders, or the founding team is more well-rounded, or there are other factors. So people are prepared to take risks. The whole society is tolerant of failures, and don't write people off because someone maybe failed in a startup once.
And I would agree that the ability to take quick responses, be comfortable with war, or potentially comes into the degree of risk taking. But I also want to explore the role of the government in funding the startups.
I'm not sure I understood the question. I'm sorry.
So, does the government have policies that support startups when they fail or when they want to try out something? What is the role of the government?
Okay, so the government has a history from even the 70s and the 80s in supporting the startup industry when it was really in its infancy. So today the government provides financing through all kinds of programs for the startup. It's generally matching funds, so you have to bring funds from investors as well. The government says that if investors are prepared to match, it's between the government will give between 30 to 60% of the funding. Okay, so there has to be matching, and they say if there's matching from investors, we prepare to take the risk. So they you obviously have to file applications and have the startup checked out by people who have experience in the field. So the government, on balance, hasn't lost money. It maybe makes money because the startups have to pay back if they succeed. Okay, if you fail, you fail. You don't pay back anything. If you succeed, you have to pay back. So the government, on balance, has done well. But because it created jobs, created tax revenues. If people get salaries, they pay tax on that. People buy food with the money, pay rent, and everything comes back somehow to the government. So it's an ecosystem that feeds itself and grows. It's not that the money's thrown away.
And what happens when, let's say, if the government has invested 30% or 40% of the startup capital, and the company just collapses, it goes into liquidation, it fails. The idea doesn't take off. There's no market, all of that. Right, and we know that it happens. So in that situation, what happens to the money? Do the people need to pay back? Do they need
No,
to?
no. You only pay back from success. So the startup writes it off, the government writes it off. Sometimes you do a fire sale of the technology for nothing, and someone else takes it on. Sometimes you freeze it, and maybe in 2-3 years' time, someone can use it. There are cases like that, but if you fail and you haven't done, you haven't frauded the government, or just failed because it didn't work out, it's fine. People accept that. There's no personal guarantees.
So when you look at the ecosystem of Israel as it has evolved, let us say over the last, let's take last 10 years, what seems to have changed in the patterns that you see as compared to when you started 30 years back, as compared to that? Where do you see the
Right.
of
So,
companies? What do you notice?
right. So there are internal factors within Israel, and obviously macroeconomic factors. Or Israel is very close to the U.S. hub, technology hub, Silicon Valley, New York, Boston area. A lot of medical devices and cyber companies there. A lot of venture capital funds. A lot of money in the Israeli high tech ecosystem comes from the U.S. So trends in the US find themselves to Israel sooner rather than later. So what's happened in the last 10 years is that, first of all, the ecosystem has grown. People have become more mature. People have more experience. There's more money generally in technology these days than there was back there. There's just more money. A lot of, I don't think there's any technology company in the world, any significant technology company in the world, including Indian companies, like, I think the top Indian technology companies also have a R&D center in Israel. Okay, what the companies do is I know Infosys have, and a lot of others. So what they do is they purchase an Israeli company and use that as their basis for R&D centers. Now, there are literally hundreds of those multinational or big technology companies all over the world. A lot of them have done a lot of acquisitions in Microsoft, IBM, Facebook, Apple, Cisco. A lot of companies have done double-digit acquisitions in Israel. So they build Intel. So they build an Israeli R&D center. It's mainly R&D. Okay, so those people get a lot of good experience, and then at the age of 35, 40, they leave the multinationals and they set up their own startup with other teams from the same companies, from other companies, from the army, from academia, and those are very fundable teams because people have experience, they have good ideas, and so as the ecosystem has grown and people get more and more experienced, more and more, the world becomes more technology driven, so the ecosystem grows and there's more demand for the products. So I think that is what's happened in the last 10 years. Now also what's happened is that Israelis used to sell out early. Okay, they used to. Intel would come and say, we want to buy your company. Google bought Waze for $1 million for $1 billion in like 5 years ago or 6 years ago. Today, people say, okay, that's okay. We'll sell. Today, and people really think they have a good product and they can compete and they can grow the company, and there are investors who can continue to finance it. They will hold on. They will grow the company so it won't be sold for $1 billion. It will be sold for $10 billion or $5 billion or $3 billion today. Okay, so there's more financing for later stage companies that can keep them going, and the investors say, don't sell out now. We'll get to another couple of milestones, and then you can. Now, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to compete with the big technology companies. So at the end of the day, people get bought out. Most of the companies get bought out sooner or later. It's not only in Israel, it's in the US as well. There's a lot of consolidation. But the companies are getting bigger and bigger. And the Israelis are becoming more and more experienced in managing big companies, which we didn't have that before. People just didn't know how to manage a company that sells tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. They can develop the product, but as soon as the company started becoming a real company that has income and clients, they didn't know how to manage that and sold out. So the world is changing. Israel is becoming more mature. The ecosystem's becoming more mature. So it's internal factors and also external factors.
Fabulous. So just for the benefit of all our listeners, I'm talking to Ian Rostowski, who is joining us from Israel. Ian is one of the top partners of the biggest law firms there, and he's got about almost 30 years of experience in funding startups, looking at how the startup ecosystem works. So a couple of things that Ian has talked to us about, is the fact that I think you have a couple of streams that work together. So you have people who get into military from the age of 18. Boys do about 3 years, girls do 2 years, and this in turn gives them exposure. So there is a large number of people who get exposure to the cyber sort of the Israeli army, and that becomes part of the reason why they form a number of these startups. Ian, I think you may want to just sort of put the mic on mute. There's background sound from your setup. Okay, now hold on. That's fine. I mean that's fine. So I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is also that I think Ian talked about a very powerful example that you have a great academic collaboration. So people sort of look at that. The government looks at funding the ecosystem, and if your company grows, then you pay back the government and you sort of pay taxes, you employ people. So it sort of in some sense is an incentive. But also more importantly, people can take risks because if the company genuinely fails, then the government is willing to write it off. So that's a very powerful incentive system. The other part of it, which I really think, I liked in the way Ian explained this entire thing to us, is the fact that you are seeing a trend that a number of companies which earlier, let's say, 10 years back or 5 years back, they used to sell out at a pretty early stage. So the example of that being, Google bought the navigation company Waze. They bought it for about $1 billion. But today companies are willing to hold on longer because of the fact that they are better risk takers. They also think that, people have learned to manage larger ecosystems. And that really makes sure that, people can hold on, and instead of the company is selling it out at $1 billion, they are happy to hold on and sell it at 5 billion or 10 billion. So I think that's another shift, which is an interesting shift. The third byproduct that I think which was interesting is that these same people, once they sort of even if it fails, these people will find another combination of talent, which could be that maybe the founder of one startup which failed, another one which is working. They get a few friends together. Friends could be from the army, friends could be from the startup world, or because a number of leading companies have put together their offices and things, from Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, a lot of Indian companies as well. And so people get the experience of working with these. They also build their own teams for the future from these companies. And that's so far been some of the fascinating things that Ian has talked to us about the startup system in Israel. Ian, have I missed out anything that you would have wanted to say? Did I miss that out? You have to unmute and then just respond.
No, I think that is the main reason. I think the technology ecosystem is very international. So people look. There are a lot of sources of funding. As I said, the main source is the US, but there are other, the Europeans, the Japanese, the Chinese, which is an issue in itself, because, how much Chinese money to get, especially when you have American money, you have to choose sometimes between you want American funding or Chinese funding. That's where we are today, basically. Maybe in India. But it's, there are a lot of sources of funding and technology cooperation. There's also bilateral agreements, maybe I can mention. I think there's with India as well, between Israel and Europe, America, Singapore. There's some joint development projects that get financed by government funding or government-related R&D grants. It's mainly for generic technology, like platform technologies, and from then on, everyone can build their own product. So that's also a source of technology.
Fabulous. So we have a question from one of our viewers that want to understand a little bit in depth about the academic collaboration, between the academics and the startups. What is the kind of flow of ideas?
Okay. So every academic institution in Israel, or any of Israel only has 5 or 6 universities and a few colleges as well. So all of the universities have a commercialization arm, which is a significant entity that deals with licensing technology to the
startups
sector, to the private sector. So a lot of startups are based on a license from an academic institution. They'll give them a license to patent and know-how. Each of those institutions also has a very organized charter of how the cake gets distributed inside the university, how much the university gets, how much the professor gets, the professor who is in charge of that technology, or it's his team that is responsible for that technology. So there's a lot of incentive for professors also to develop technologies, to do research which has real life applications, because they know that they can, there's a reasonable chance that they can license that technology out and get something in return, not only academic recognition, but also real money.
When you, thanks. Sorry, please continue. I thought.
Yeah. So there are a lot of projects like that. Most of the projects, I think, percentage-wise, are in the healthcare, medical devices, food sector, maybe a bit in the cyber technology, but we're talking about sectors that are very heavy technology, projects that need heavy technology. Okay, that it helps that someone already has done research, has a patent, so you hit the ground running, kind of thing. You don't start from scratch.
Perfect. When you look at the way forward, I mean, you sort of emphasize a lot on the technology-driven innovation. Yeah. When you look at that technology-driven innovation, and you were also sort of alluding to the fact that besides technology, you also focus on the teams. So I want to spend a couple of minutes really talking to you about. You said you look at the founding teams. When you start to work with a startup, what are some of those things you've noticed?
Yeah, so it's evolved over the years, but I think when we see a founding team, and we talked about the importance of risk taking. If you see a founder team and they say say there's three founders, and all three of them have a day job and say, when we get funding, we will leave our day job and we'll do the startup. That is probably not going to work out. Okay. Most of the time when people are invested and that is their job, and that they know that, they've taken the risk and they have to, and they've decided that this is their baby and they need to bring it to fruition, there's much bigger chance of success. You also look at the background of the founders, the balance between the team. If they're all marketing guys and don't have any technology guys, and they need technology for their product, it's probably not going to work. They can do it theoretically outsourcing, but it generally doesn't work that way. If they don't have a lot of experience, they just come out of university or had a relatively low-level job in Google or something like that, then the chance of succeeding are probably less than it's worth betting on. Sometimes you have founding groups, and we see it more and more, coming to the table with already investors willing to invest. They say, just start it up and we'll invest. Okay? And so they have funding from day one and can build a proper startup from day one, instead of bootstrapping. A lot of bootstrapping startups do succeed, but if you have funding early on, so you can get proper IP protection, proper legal documentation, everything, you build it the right way from the start, obviously you improve your chances of success.
So a couple of things that you mentioned that, you notice that when people come in and they've got they don't have a day job, this is what they're going to do. They are fully vested. That actually increases the chance of success. The second
No
thing
question.
I heard you say is that if these guys actually have a techie in the founding team, that makes sure that the thing succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
I have a corollary to just clarify. Do you see a lot more of two-member, three-member teams kind of thing, or do you see solo founders also succeeding? Which of the two?
Solo founders do exist. The chances of having funding and succeeding are lower statistically. Most of the teams are two or three. Sometimes we even see up to five. But solo founders, it's a very difficult, very difficult.
Why is it difficult for a solo founder?
Because it's not something today to have a successful startup. You need multi-disciplinary team to really see it through. It's very difficult to do that with outsourcing. And if you have a founding team, like say you start the startup with three founders, everyone has, say, for argument's sake, a third of the startup. To maybe one guy has 40%, others have 30% each. But they have real skin in the game, right? If you are a sole founder and you bring in people, you'll give them 2-3%. You'll never have real co-founders, so it will never be real cooperation, or you'll never have a team that are really with you, really behind you, working in cooperation. Will be a boss and has people working for him, which can work, but the chance of, as compared to a proper founding team, are less.
And when you think about the people working together, what is the median age of successful founders, so founding teams? What is it? You because, and the reason why I asked that question is you also had an interesting observation that if somebody has worked at a junior level, even if it's in a very well-known company, um, you're not that impressed with that. I mean, why?
Because you wouldn't have the necessary experience. Maybe I'm not saying it's not it's a disqualifying fact in all cases, but someone who's led a development team or a product development team or something like that, or a marketing team, instead of being just one of the marketing people, obviously has better experience, sees the whole picture rather than just a part of the picture. The medium age, I think you can say it's a young people's game. Startups. The average founding, I'm not sure I have the statistics, but I would say the average founding team is between early to mid 30s to 40s. That's the average founding team. If you over 45, you probably won't get VC funding.
So people.
No one writes it and no one says that, but a lot of teams, when they're older, say over 50, you probably won't get VC funding.
That's interesting.
Some VCs, they look for people who are younger.
Sure. I mean, and everybody can have.
There are exceptions. There are exceptions. Maybe 30% of the startups are 50, but most of them are young teams.
Sure. And one of the reasons if you sort of talk to many of the people in the VC ecosystem, they all will say off the record, because they want the people to be working 18 hours a day, and if you have a family to go back to and all of that, then many people, they say don't put in those kind of hours, so that they want the people to crunch the time. Is that Is that a commonly held view as well?
Yeah. I think so. I think they look for people who are hungry, okay, and a lot of people who have made it and or have been around for a while are less hungry, you know, less dynamic, less hungry. Also, the people coming out of the army and the universities looking for jobs are in their mid 20s or 25, 26, and they like working with people who are not that far from their age, right? So I think that's another factor.
So, you've actually worked in this particular space for about 3 decades. Um, do you find that, your perspective on what to look for in a firm, the investment, the probability of success, your prediction, all of that has improved with your experience of 3 decades? Or do you feel that it was pretty much the same. The processes have not changed. What's your take on
Um, I think maybe in the past, I'm talking about 20 years ago, you could maybe understand a founder who would say, I have a day job and I would, if I have funding, I'll start a startup. Nowadays, that doesn't work. But it's very difficult for us to evaluate the technology. So you can only evaluate the founding team, okay? The balance between them, the experience, and the fact that this is what they've decided to do and they've taken the risk gives a lot of confidence because they're intelligent people and they know what they're doing. And if they say, we think we have something and we're prepared to see it through and take the risk, I think that says a lot. So I think what we've learned over the years is that the chance of success, if you have people who have not made that leap of faith, much less, much less.
Ian, when you look at the Israeli ecosystem of startups, I mean, obviously there are loads and loads of really impressive things. What would you define to be, if you were to look at it from the outside, what are some of the gaps that you would see where, you wish it had those elements as, what would those be? What would be a couple of those elements that you would add in to make it even better? What would that be?
Well, first of all, there's a big shortage in Israel of qualified technical people, even though Israel has percentage-wise a very, very, I think one of the highest in the world percentages of academic degrees among people. But there's a shortage of skills. A serious shortage of skills. So a lot of people, outsource to other countries, development work or programming or things like that, including India and including other places, which is maybe good, but I think the experts say that that's something that's holding back the whole ecosystem,
Right.
to a certain extent. The other thing is money. There were cases. I'm old enough to have experienced the internet bubble of before 2000, where any project you added a .com at the end and you can raise financing. So there was too much money. There can be a case that there's too much money chasing startups, and then there's a lot of junk around. But I don't think we're there yet, and there are areas that there's a shortage of financing. For instance, I think in clean tech and water technologies, which Israel is very, very prominent. I think that there is an issue with funding. So in cyber, there's a lot of funding, and in a lot of other areas, there's a lot of funding. There's some areas which are important and have a lot of potential, that there's just not a lot of funding sources in those areas. And I think that's a significant issue. You may have government funding that can get you started, but then you get stuck for the growth fund, or to move to the next stage.
Right.
Clean tech, water technologies, to a certain extent in medical technologies. I think the funds look for more mature projects. So there's a stage that there's a funding gap, which is difficult to bridge.
One of our listeners asked this question that talking about lack of technological skilled people. Does it include biotech as well? I mean, how
It includes biotech, definitely. Definitely, I don't think there's a single field in which we don't have a lack of, or we have a lack of engineers or or people, with technological skills. They talk about 10,000 by Israel's 10,000 people missing who need. So what happens is that companies poach from one another, and they have to compete with the multinational companies. I mean, Google, they pay salaries which are outrageous. Okay, so why would someone work for a startup and not for Google? The startup has to pay maybe not what Google pays, but a significant salary, enough to live quite well, and then and the equity in addition. So startups burn a lot of cash, because and a lot of that goes on people. Okay,
right.
there's a lot of competition for good people.
Ian, I just want to say thank you so much. We are coming up to the end of the hour. I want to say thank you for taking the time today, and especially at a point of time when, as we started by saying that there is a war going on in Israel, and as we said, you could have at any point of time the siren go on, and you would have to take the bombshell here.
I'm thankful that they gave us a reprieve. I also wanted to say that our firm has a dedicated Indian desk. I have a partner. His name is Benjamin Grossman, and that's what he does. Before COVID, India doesn't allow any foreign legal presence. The Indian board or whatever, the legal profession, have succeeded in keeping all. But we have a desk that Benjamin Grossman spends a lot of time in India, helping Indians do business in Israel, Israelis do business in India, and we believe in the connection between Israel and India. There's a lot of business has been done, and there's a lot of business to be done, and a lot of synergies. So it's not something that should be taken lightly.
No, I totally agree with that, and and our friend Gary, so Gary is also here, and he's a common friend, and so it's really good to have guys like you as part of our ecosystem. Look forward to continued conversations. All the very best. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Look forward to catching up. Take care.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.